Okay, so imagine a politician so completely outrageous that most people just wrote him off as a clown. Now, imagine that same guy making predictions that are so specific and so weirdly accurate that people start calling him a prophet. Today, we're diving into the strange and startling world of Volodymyr Zhirinovsky, one of Russia's most controversial figures, whose words from the past are echoing in some really chilling ways right now. And look, this wasn't just some vague political threat. Zhirinovsky said these words in late December 2021. The world was just getting ready for a new year, but he was warning that it wouldn't be a peaceful one for Russia. He claimed this would be the year Russia would become a great country again. It's a pretty heavy statement on its own, but then it gets way more specific. And this is where the story gets, well, honestly, just plain weird. He didn't just name the year, he pinpointed the date, February 22nd, and even the time, 4 in the morning. This wasn't a prediction anymore. It was practically a timetable. And considering Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine kicked off just 2 days later, well, that kind of detail is what took Zhirinovsky from just being a loudmouth politician to, for many people, a political prophet. So let's start right there with that February 22nd prediction. It's so startling, you just have to take a closer look. So how could he have known? Was it a wild guess that just happened to land? Did he have inside information? Or was something else going on? To even begin to figure that out, we have to understand the man himself.
Exactly. That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? To get a handle on the predictions, you've got to get a handle on the man. So who was Volodymyr Zelensky?
Well, to put it mildly, he was Russia's professional provocateur. We're talking for decades. Zhirinovsky wasn't some minor figure in the background. He was arguably the loudest, most in-your-face political voice in the entire country. He was basically a political showman through and through. He was the longtime leader of the ironically named Liberal Democratic Party of Russia, which, you guessed it, was neither liberal nor democratic. His whole brand was this super aggressive, in-your-face populist nationalism that you just couldn't ignore. I mean, this guy was a permanent fixture on the scene right from the moment the Soviet Union collapsed. He started his party back in '91, he was always running for president, and he used his seat in parliament like it was his own personal stage. And his message never, ever changed. Make Russia strong again and use authoritarian means to do it if you have to. And his style? It was pure fire and brimstone. He wasn't just criticizing the West. He seemed to genuinely get a kick out of the idea of its collapse. This was not subtle diplomacy, you know? It was 100% political theater, designed to get the biggest possible reaction. And yeah, he could get even more direct and a lot more threatening. Statements like this one, aimed at Poland, were his bread and butter. It was all designed to shock and provoke, sure, but it also appealed to a certain kind of Russian nationalism. It painted him as this guy who would unapologetically defend the motherland, no matter how nasty he had to be. But you have to wonder, right? Beyond all the insults and the theatrics, was there actually a real worldview, a coherent vision? The answer is yes. Zhirinovsky had a very specific and often pretty terrifying idea of what the future of the world was going to look like. And here's his vision in a nutshell: a future of global conflict. He wasn't talking about little border skirmishes or political disagreements. No, he saw a world completely remade by huge, catastrophic wars, often involving nuclear weapons. I mean, just look at the scale of what he was predicting. He saw 3 major nuclear flashpoints. First, a war in the Middle East. His crude words were, between Jews and Arabs. That would lead to 50 million casualties. Then, a war between India and Pakistan with a mind-boggling 200 million dead. And then a third nuclear war somewhere in the Far East. It is a truly apocalyptic vision for our century. So what happens after all this global chaos? Well, in his mind, a whole new world order rises from the ashes. In Zhirinovsky's future, Russia doesn't just get by, it dominates. It becomes the only superpower. The US collapsed. Ukraine wiped off the map. NATO finished. Even the Russian ruble replaces the dollar. It's basically the ultimate Russian imperial fantasy. He was totally convinced that the future belonged to this new Eastern Bloc, with Russia, China, and India all teamed up. And he thought this alliance would just roll over its smaller neighbors. He saw countries like Poland and Ukraine as completely doomed, just caught in the middle of these giant global powers. All right, so the big question: how has all this actually held up? A prophet is only as good as their prophecies, right? The source material we're working from actually gives us a kind of report card for Zhirinovsky's predictions, checking in on them as of 2024.
So, with all that in mind, how are his 2024 predictions actually doing? Now, it's really important to say that what you're about to see is the assessment from our source material. This is their contemporary analysis of his forecasts. Okay, let's break this scorecard down. According to the source, in the column of things that came true, they list Russia taking action in Ukraine, check. Ukraine not holding its elections because of the war, check. And relations in the Middle East getting a lot worse, check. And interestingly, they also include increased political activism among young people. Now, on the other side, in the not yet column, you've got his really huge claims. The total collapse of the US, Ukraine completely disappearing as a country, and that formal military alliance between Russia, China, and India. So as you can see, it's a very mixed bag. So, regardless of whether he was a good fortune teller or not, what's his ultimate legacy? What kind of mark did this incredibly controversial figure actually leave on Russia? Even in his last days, right from his hospital bed, his focus never changed. This quote, it really gets the core of his entire political life. This unwavering, almost fanatical belief that Russia's destiny was to get back on its feet and be a great, powerful nation again. So in the end, whether you see him as a visionary or a villain, you just can't tell the story of modern Russia without leaving him out. He was a product of his time, that chaotic, messy, post-Soviet era, and he became this powerful symbol of all that turmoil and that deep-seated desire for a nationalist comeback. Which really just leaves us with one final question. Was Volodymyr Zelensky a true political prophet who had some strange gift of foresight? Was he just a calculated provocateur who knew exactly how to get a headline? Or was he simply a mirror reflecting all the anxieties, the ambitions, and the anger of a nation going through a massive change? Maybe he was all three.